Welcome. Before we dive in, I want you to do something simple. Let your shoulders soften, unclench your jaw, and allow your breath to slow just a little. You're here in this moment, and that's all you need. We're about to wander together into one of the deepest, most mysterious questions humanity has ever asked. Does time actually exist? Not just the hours on your watch or the numbers on your phone, but the thing itself, time. Is it out there, an invisible river carrying us forward? Or is it something softer, stranger, maybe even an invention of our own minds? You've felt time move in ways that make no sense. Think about those endless afternoons when you were a child, when summer holidays seemed to stretch on forever, and each day felt like a complete world of its own. Now think about how quickly a year can vanish in adulthood. How birthdays arrive before you've fully absorbed the last one. How can the same hours feel so different depending on who you are, what you're doing, or how you're feeling? You've also felt the drag of waiting in line, staring at the clock, each minute stretching out like chewing gum pulled to its limit. And then there are those fleeting moments, your favorite song ending too soon. A kiss that feels like a blink where time races past and leaves you wanting more. What exactly are we measuring when we talk about time? If time is real, if it's some fundamental part of the universe, then why does it feel so slippery, so inconsistent in our daily lives? Why do two people, sitting side by side in the same room, describe the same hour in completely different ways? Maybe you've had this experience. You're sitting in a waiting room, bored out of your mind, while the person next to you is lost in a book. To you, the minutes drag painfully. To them, they vanish unnoticed. Is the clock lying to one of you? Or is time itself something far stranger than we assume? Scientists, philosophers, and poets have all wrestled with this paradox. We build clocks with astonishing precision, atomic clocks that won't lose a second for millions of years, yet we can't agree on what time actually is. Physics tells us one story. That time is woven into the fabric of space, that it bends and stretches depending on where you are and how fast you move. Philosophy offers another. That time may be nothing more than the lens through which our minds organize experience. And your personal life tells yet another. That time is elastic, unpredictable, sometimes a friend, sometimes a thief. Which of these, if any, is the truth? As we begin, I don't want you to feel pressured to find a definite answer. Instead, let's treat this exploration like a slow walk through a garden at dusk. There will be paths leading in many directions: science, philosophy, memory, and imagination. Each turn might reveal something fascinating. Why a black hole can slow time almost to a halt, why your brain sometimes loses track of it entirely, why entropy makes broken things stay broken. These are the mysteries waiting ahead. But right now, here in this moment, we're only at the gate, asking the most essential question. Is time real, or is it just a story we tell ourselves? Consider how deeply time rules us. Every day you wake up to alarms, follow schedules, make appointments. Entire economies are built on deadlines and calendars. You may even feel guilty when you waste time, as if it were a currency being spent. But step back and ask, what is actually being spent? You can hold money in your hand, measure distance with a ruler, taste food with your tongue. But time, you can't touch it, smell it, or save it in a jar. It exists only in passing, always slipping as soon as you notice it. Doesn't that seem strange for something we treat as one of the most solid realities of life? There's also the haunting truth that time defines our identities. You remember who you were yesterday, imagine who you might be tomorrow, and hold both together to create a sense of self. Without time, could you even have a you? Or would you just be a collection of unconnected experiences, scattered like stars across a sky with no pattern. This is the power of time. It makes your life feel like a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But is that story a reflection of reality or a necessary illusion your mind invented to survive? As we go deeper, I want you to keep an open mind. There will be moments where the ground seems to shift under your feet, where the very concept of before and after might start to blur. That's part of the adventure. Think of it like standing on a beach at night, listening to the waves. You know the tide is moving, but in the darkness, the movement feels mysterious, endless, almost timeless. That's the kind of space we're creating here together, a space where we can question what we take for granted, gently and without fear. You've already noticed something. We're talking about time, but every example so far has been about experience, about perception, about the human heart and mind. That's because to ask if time exists is really to ask two questions at once. First, does it exist out there in the universe, woven into reality itself? And second, does it exist in here, as part of how you experience being alive? The answers may not match. And that tension, the gap between the cosmic and the personal, is where this journey becomes so compelling. So here's my invitation. Let's wander together. Set aside the rush of your day, the to-do lists, the clocks, the constant push to be on time. For the next little while, we'll move slowly. We'll ask big questions. We'll allow ourselves to feel awe, to get lost, to wonder without immediately searching for resolution. Because maybe the real gift of exploring time isn't about proving whether it exists, but about seeing our lives in a new light. Maybe, just maybe, the mystery of time is the very thing that makes life precious. And if you're ready, let's step into that mystery now. Think back to when you were a child, when a single summer day could feel like an entire lifetime. Mornings stretched wide open, hours seemed to flow endlessly, and the weeks between the start of vacation and the first day back at school felt almost infinite. Those days were filled with moments that carved themselves deeply into memory. The smell of cut grass, the laughter of friends, the heat of the sun on your skin. Each second seemed magnified, as though time itself wanted to linger and let you drink it in. Do you remember that sensation? The feeling that you had all the time in the world. Now contrast that with the way time feels as an adult. Weeks blur together, months vanish before you've even fully absorbed them, and suddenly you find yourself wondering, how is it already December? Entire years collapse into fragments. A handful of birthdays, a few vacations, some blurry flashes of workdays and commutes. You blink, and the season has already changed. You blink again, and a decade has passed. Where did it go? Why does time speed up as we age, when each year is objectively the same length? The truth is, our perception of time isn't fixed. It stretches and contracts depending on what we're doing, how we feel, and what we're paying attention to. Waiting for exam results can make a single afternoon feel torturous. Falling in love can make a night feel like an instant. Grieving can trap you in moments that refuse to move forward, while joy can propel you forward so quickly that you wish you could hit pause. This is the paradox. The clock may move steadily, but our minds do not. We experience time in ways that defy its mechanical ticking. Think about boredom, for example. You sit in a waiting room, scrolling your phone, feeling restless. Each minute seems to drag its feet, refusing to end. You check the time repeatedly, convinced hours must have passed, only to discover it's been 5 minutes. Compare that to losing yourself in a great book or an engaging conversation. You glance up and realize hours have flown by without your noticing. How can the same 60 minutes feel like a prison in one context and like a fleeting spark in another? The clock didn't change. You did. This distortion has a lot to do with attention. When you're bored, your mind is understimulated, so it starts counting each second. You notice every tick of the clock, every little detail, because there's nothing else to occupy you. Time slows down because you are hyper-aware of its passing. When you're engaged or excited, your mind is flooded with new information and sensory input. You're so absorbed that you don't keep track of time at all, and it races past unnoticed. In this way, perception creates elasticity. Time stretches when we focus on it, and it disappears when we don't. But there's another layer, memory. Childhood feels longer not just because we had fewer responsibilities, but because everything was new. Your first bike ride, your first day of school, your first heartbreak, these events etch themselves deeply into your memory because they stood out. Novelty creates density. When you look back, a year filled with firsts feels massive, because your memory is packed with vivid markers. Adulthood, by contrast, is often filled with routines. Commuting, working, scrolling through the same apps, repeating the same tasks, your brain doesn't bother to record these as vividly. So when you look back, the years collapse, empty of unique anchors. Time seems to have vanished, but what really disappeared were the memories that made it feel full. That's why a childhood summer felt eternal. Every day was an adventure, every experience new, every memory a bright thread. That's also why adult years slip by. Routine compresses memory, and compressed memory collapses time. It isn't that time is moving faster now, it's that you have fewer standout moments to hold on to. Isn't that unsettling? That the speed of your life might depend less on the clock and more on how vividly you choose to live it. This realization can be both frightening and empowering. Frightening because it suggests that if you live on autopilot, the years will continue to vanish. Empowering because it means you can slow your experience of life by seeking novelty, creating memories, and paying attention. Try this. Take a different route to work, learn a new skill, travel somewhere you've never been. The days may feel longer, richer, and more memorable, not because the clock slowed down, but because you gave your brain something worth recording. In a sense, you can stretch time by filling it with meaning. But perception doesn't only bend backward into memory, it also stretches forward into anticipation. Waiting for something important often warps time into something unbearable. Think about the night before an exam, or the hours leading up to a flight, or the minutes before someone you love walks through the door. The anticipation creates a tension that seems to elongate every second. Your mind rehearses the future, filling the present with friction. By contrast, once the event arrives, the time you've been dreading or longing for seems to pass in a flash. The build-up is slow, the moment itself is fleeting. How strange is it that our projection of the future can alter the way we experience the present? Then there is the most slippery part of all, the now. We like to think we're living in the present, but the truth is that the present is almost impossible to pin down. By the time you notice a moment, it's already gone, filed away in memory. Neuroscientists suggest that our brains actually live a fraction of a second behind reality, stitching together inputs from our senses into a seamless flow. What you call the now is really a reconstruction, a story your mind tells about what just happened. If that's true, are we ever truly in the present, or are we always one step behind? This is where the question becomes uncomfortable. If the past is just memory, the future is just imagination, and the present is already slipping into the past, then what exactly is time in our experience? Is it an external reality we inhabit, or is it something we construct moment by moment? And if two people can live the same hour in radically different ways, one enduring agony, the other floating in bliss, can time really be objective? Or is it deeply, intimately personal? You may notice how these questions tug at you. Part of you wants certainty, a clear answer, a definition that makes everything solid. But another part of you, perhaps the deeper part, feels the beauty in the mystery itself. If time is elastic, if it bends according to our perception, then life itself becomes a canvas we can paint on. You can make time feel long or short, heavy or light, abundant or scarce, depending on how you choose to live. Isn't that both terrifying and liberating? That your very sense of existence is shaped not by the ticking of a clock, but by how you meet each moment. And maybe this is where the fear of wasting time comes from. We sense that time isn't something external we can control, but something internal that slips according to how we live. Every time we lose ourselves in distraction, every time we numb ourselves with routine, we collapse our lives into nothingness. But every time we notice the colors of the sunset, every time we share a meaningful conversation, every time we open ourselves to wonder, we stretch life wide open. We create moments that last, not because the clock stopped, but because memory holds them forever. So when people say, time flies, maybe what they're really saying is, life becomes invisible when you stop paying attention. And when they say, that hour dragged, maybe they're really saying, I was too aware of the emptiness of the moment. This is the paradox of human time. It is at once rigid and fluid, fixed and elastic, relentless and deeply personal. Cannot be separated from the way we feel, remember, and imagine. But if time bends according to perception, if it speeds up or slows down depending on mood, memory, and anticipation, then can we really call it an objective thing at all? Or is it more like a mirror, reflecting our inner lives back to us? That is the question that lingers as we continue our journey. For now, hold this thought close. The way you experience time might reveal more about who you are than about time itself. And if that's true, then the next step is to ask, what exactly is it that we're measuring when we say a second has passed? For as long as humans have walked the earth, we've tried to catch time in our hands, to hold it steady, to measure it, to make it predictable. Long before wristwatches and phone alarms, people turned to the sky, to the shadows, to the flow of water, all in an effort to pin down something that constantly slipped away. Imagine the first humans noticing that the sun cast different lengths of shadows as it rose and fell. A stick in the ground could suddenly tell them something about the passing of the day. This wasn't just clever, it was revolutionary. The sundial transformed the sky into a clock. But even then, did they measure time itself, or just its footprints? The Egyptians refined this art with water clocks, letting liquid drip at a steady pace to mark intervals. The Mayans built their entire civilization on calendars more precise than anything Europe would see for centuries. The Babylonians looked to the stars, dividing the heavens into patterns that guided planting, festivals, and rituals. Each culture, in its own way, believed that by measuring time they could gain power over it. Yet what they really built was not mastery of time but a framework for life. Festivals weren't simply moments on a calendar. They were anchors of identity. The calendar was less about numbers and more about meaning, turning the chaos of existence into a rhythm that gave life shape. And yet, beneath all these innovations, life itself still moved differently than the marks we carved into stone or parchment. A sundial might tell you it's noon. But what is noon to a child waiting for a father to return home, or to a farmer watching the rain clouds gather? 1 hour could be salvation, another eternity. Time was being measured, yes, but not necessarily experienced in the way the clock suggested. Isn't that the contradiction we still live with today? A life organized by external measurements, even as our inner experience refuses to conform. Think of how much our days are ruled by schedules. You wake up to the sound of an alarm, maybe begrudgingly. You check the clock when you leave for work, race against it when deadlines approach, glance at it in boredom during meetings, and watch it anxiously when waiting for someone to arrive. Your phone pings reminders, your watch nudges you, your calendar dictates what you'll do next. You live in a web of measurements, precise down to the second. But ask yourself honestly, do you actually live time this way, second by second, or is your experience of time something far messier, more elastic, more human? The contrast is sharp. Measured time feels cold, impersonal, relentless. It insists that a minute is always 60 seconds, that an hour is always 60 minutes, and that a day is always 24 hours. But lived time refuses to obey. A joyful dinner with friends feels shorter than a painful conversation you wish would end. A single sleepless night stretches on longer than an entire week of busy workdays. Time as the clock describes it is rigid. Time as you experience it is fluid. And yet, somehow, we trust the clock more than we trust ourselves. Isn't that curious? We hand over authority to machines, even when our own bodies insist on a different truth. This obsession with precision has only intensified. Mechanical clocks gave way to pendulums, pendulums to quartz, quartz to atomic timekeeping. The modern atomic clock doesn't just measure hours. It counts the vibrations of cesium atoms over 9 billion oscillations per second. It's so precise that in millions of years it will be off by less than a second. And here's where the question becomes almost absurd. Why do we need such precision? Why does your phone need to connect to an atomic clock orbiting in space just to tell you the time? The answer is unsettlingly practical. Our world now runs on synchronization. GPS satellites, financial systems, internet servers all depend on a level of timing accuracy far beyond what any human could perceive. Without atomic clocks, planes wouldn't navigate, stock markets would collapse, and digital communication would fall apart. The world of machines requires absolute coordination, and so time has been tightened into something more exact than any culture before could have imagined. But this exactness only highlights the gap between measurement and experience. Because even as satellites beam down nanosecond precision, you still feel your life passing unevenly. Technology tells you what time it is, but not how time feels. Your watch doesn't know that you're grieving and each day feels endless. Your phone doesn't notice that you've fallen in love and time is dissolving into a blur. The clock insists on equality, but your heart insists on inequality. And maybe this is the real tension. The more we measure time, the more we risk forgetting that measurement is not the same as living. This isn't a modern struggle. Ancient people also understood the difference. A festival wasn't just a date on a calendar, it was an experience of renewal, of identity, of sacred presence. The Mayan calendar wasn't just about predicting eclipses. It was about weaving human life into cosmic cycles. Even now, our calendars hold birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. These dates aren't just markers. They're vessels of meaning. The number on the page doesn't matter, it's the memory, the anticipation, the emotional weight that transforms the date into lived reality. When you celebrate a birthday, you don't feel like you're measuring 12 months. You feel like you're marking growth, change, identity. The calendar provides structure, but the meaning comes from you. And yet, meaning and measurement often collide. How many times have you rushed through a day, checking off tasks, only to collapse into bed and wonder where the time went? How often do you look back on a week and realize you remember almost nothing of it, even though every hour was accounted for? Measurement gave you structure, but it didn't give you life. Contrast that with a vacation, a moment of novelty, a day when you broke routine. Even if it lasted the same number of hours, it feels longer in memory, richer in texture. Why? Because measurement organizes time into equal pieces, but life fills those pieces unequally. This is why people sometimes feel enslaved by the clock. It governs, it dictates, it punishes lateness, it rewards punctuality. But beneath it all, the question lingers. Is the clock showing us reality, or only enforcing an illusion of order? When you feel guilty for being wasteful with time, what are you actually wasting? Seconds, or opportunities for meaning? And when you are productive, are you truly alive or simply obedient to the measurement system that surrounds you? In truth, we live with two kinds of time at once. There is Chronos, the measured linear time of clocks and calendars. And there is Kairos, the lived, qualitative time of experience, where a single moment can feel eternal and meaningful. Chronos is necessary for civilization. Kairos is necessary for the soul. Without Chronos, we cannot coordinate or build. Without Kairos, we cannot feel alive. The problem arises when we confuse one for the other, when we assume that what the clock tells us is the whole story, forgetting the richness of lived time that resists being caged. The irony is that in our effort to master time, we've often become its servants. We worship punctuality, we obsess over deadlines, we let alarms dictate our moods. Yet no matter how precise our measurements become, no clock can explain why a single kiss feels too short, or why grief feels endless. Maybe the real challenge is not to trap time, but to learn how to live with both faces of it, the rigid precision that society demands and the flowing experience that makes us human. So the next time you check the time on your phone, consider this. Behind that glowing screen lies a heartbeat of atoms vibrating billions of times per second, synchronized with satellites spinning high above you. That measurement is astonishing, a triumph of science and human ingenuity. But it cannot tell you whether this moment feels heavy or light, fleeting or eternal. That part is yours alone. And perhaps that is the hidden truth we've carried since the first sundial cast a shadow in the sand. Measured time can keep us organized, but it cannot make us feel alive. Only lived time can do that. And the question that lingers is whether we are meant to chase the precision of the clock, or the fullness of the moment. Up to now, we've been moving through time as you feel it and as you measure it. But now, let's step into the domain of science, where the very rules of reality begin to bend. Here, time is not just a personal perception or a cultural invention. It's something deeper, woven into the very fabric of the universe. At least, that's what we're told. And yet, even here, even in the most precise language of physics, time reveals itself as slippery, strange, and often contradictory. So let's wander into this territory slowly, carefully, because what you're about to discover may change the way you think about every tick of every clock you've ever heard. For centuries, people believed time was absolute. It seemed obvious. The seconds, minutes, and hours that passed for you must pass in the same way for me, and for everyone, everywhere. Time was like a universal river, flowing steadily, indifferent to who was swimming in it. This was the Newtonian view. Time as a fixed backdrop, an independent stage on which all events played out. It was comforting. It meant the universe had a kind of order, a consistency we could depend on. But in the early 20th century, Albert Einstein shattered that certainty. And once he did, nothing about time would ever feel the same again. Einstein's theory of relativity showed that time is not absolute at all. It bends, it stretches, it dilates. Imagine two twins. One stays on Earth, the other boards a spaceship that travels close to the speed of light. When the traveler finally returns home, they are younger than the twin who stayed behind. The years passed differently for each of them. To the one in the spaceship, perhaps it felt like only a short journey. To the one on Earth, decades may have gone by. Both are correct, both lived real experiences, but time itself split depending on how fast they were moving. Isn't that astonishing? Something as intimate as age, as personal as a wrinkle on your skin, can diverge based on how quickly you traverse the cosmos. This isn't science fiction. It's measurable. In fact, we already have proof in everyday technology. The GPS in your phone works only because satellites orbiting Earth account for time dilation. The satellites are moving fast and sitting in weaker gravity than we are down here on Earth's surface. If their onboard clocks weren't adjusted for relativity, their signals would drift, and your maps would place you miles away from where you actually are. Think about that. The device you casually check to find a cafe or avoid traffic is quietly correcting for Einstein's equations every single second. Without relativity, your phone wouldn't know where you are. Time itself bends enough that we have to compensate to function in the modern world. And relativity doesn't just bend time with speed. Gravity, too, has its grip on it. The stronger the gravity, the slower time flows. Imagine standing on Earth while someone else hovers high above the atmosphere. The one closer to Earth's surface, pulled harder by gravity, experiences time just a little more slowly than the one far away. The difference is tiny, almost imperceptible, but it's real. If you spend your life at sea level, you'll age ever so slightly less than someone who spends their life on a mountaintop. Now stretch this thought further. Near a black hole, where gravity is unimaginably strong, time slows to such an extreme that, from the outside, it seems almost to stop. An astronaut hovering near the edge of a black hole could spend only minutes in orbit, while millions of years pass in the wider universe. This is not just theory. It's the way reality works. Time itself is elastic, dependent on where you are and how you move. Pause for a moment and let that sink in. We tend to think of time as the most reliable thing we know. Clocks tick, calendars flip, birthdays come whether we're ready or not. And yet, physics tells us that time is not steady at all. It bends with motion, it warps with gravity, it stretches and contracts depending on your position in the universe. Isn't it unsettling that the very thing you thought was universal is instead so fragile, so malleable? And doesn't it open up a sense of awe, that the universe is stranger, more mysterious, and more beautiful than we dared to imagine? But relativity is only half the story. If Einstein bent time, thermodynamics gave it a direction. This is the arrow of time, the reason you remember the past but not the future, the reason broken glasses don't reassemble themselves, the reason coffee cools but doesn't spontaneously heat back up. It's the law of entropy. In any closed system, disorder tends to increase. Order becomes chaos. Energy spreads. And this increase of entropy is what gives time its forward march. Without entropy, physics doesn't actually require time to move in one direction. The equations work just as well backward as forward. But in reality, you never see shattered glass jump back together or spilled milk leap into a cup. Why? Because entropy keeps pushing everything toward greater disorder. Think of an ice cube melting in a glass of water. The cube begins crisp and solid, the water clear. Over time, the cube shrinks, the water warms, the clarity fades. Energy has spread out, order has dissolved. It's irreversible. Or think of shuffling a deck of cards. Starting from a perfect order ace through king, you shuffle and shuffle, and randomness increases. Could the cards, by chance, return to perfect order? Technically, yes. but the probability is so low that it might as well be impossible. The universe runs on this same logic. Entropy grows, and time's arrow points forward. That's why we age, why we remember yesterday and not tomorrow, why life moves in one direction and never loops back. Entropy makes the arrow of time feel unavoidable, absolute. And yet, isn't it curious that physics equations themselves don't require this direction? They allow for symmetry, for reversibility. It's entropy that makes us feel time's weight. It's inevitability. Now put these two pieces together. Relativity tells us that time is flexible, elastic, shaped by motion and gravity. Thermodynamics tells us that time has a direction, carved by entropy. Together, they paint a picture of time that is far more complex than the ticking of a clock. Time is not absolute, nor is it merely perception. It is a dimension entangled with space, bent by matter, shaped by energy, and defined by disorder. And yet, even with all this knowledge, one question remains. Is time truly fundamental, or is it an emergent illusion? Here is where curiosity pulls us forward, because quantum physics begins to whisper something even stranger. In some of its deepest equations, time doesn't even appear. At the most fundamental level, the laws of physics don't seem to require it. This is where the ground shifts beneath us again. If relativity and entropy shape the time we experience, quantum theory hints that beneath the surface, time may not exist at all. And if that's true, then everything we've said so far about clocks, about memory, about black holes and coffee cooling may be just surface effects, illusions built on something deeper we don't yet understand. Think about what that would mean. All the moments you cling to your happiest memories, your deepest regrets, your hopes for tomorrow could exist not because time carries them forward, but because your mind weaves them into a story. What if the flow of time is something your brain creates to make sense of a timeless reality? What if past, present, and future are all equally real, existing at once like pages in a book? You can only read one page at a time, but the whole book is already there. Isn't that both disorienting and exhilarating? To imagine that time's flow might not be the deepest truth, but rather the way consciousness experiences something that is, at its core, timeless. And so we arrive at a paradox. Science, which promises clarity, leaves us with wonder and confusion. Relativity tells us time is relative. Entropy tells us time has an arrow. Quantum physics whispers that maybe time isn't real at all. Each layer reveals something breathtaking, and yet none offers a complete picture. So where does that leave us? Maybe with a new humility, a reminder that the mystery of time is larger than any single explanation. Maybe with gratitude, that we get to live inside a universe so strange that even the flow of moments cannot be taken for granted. So the next time you sip your coffee, watch the steam rise and the warmth fade, remember that you're witnessing entropy in action, the arrow of time pushing forward. The next time you check your GPS, remember that satellites high above are correcting for relativity, bending time just enough to guide you to your destination. And the next time you gaze at the stars, remember that near their edges, around black holes and vast gravitational wells, time itself is slowing, stretching, resisting the march you feel here on Earth. In each of these, science doesn't diminish the wonder of time. It deepens it. It shows us that what feels ordinary is in fact extraordinary, that what we assume is simple is anything but. And perhaps, as we move toward the even stranger landscapes of quantum physics and philosophy, the most important thing to carry with you is this. Time is not a single thing, not a straight line, not a uniform current. It is elastic, it is directional, it is both real and elusive. And maybe, just maybe, The most astonishing truth of all is that the more we understand time, the more it slips away from us, reminding us that some mysteries are meant to be lived, not solved. If relativity bent our trust in time and entropy gave it direction, quantum theory takes the ground right out from beneath our feet. It whispers something far stranger, something that unsettles not just our clocks or our calendars, but the very way we think of existence itself. Because at the smallest scales, in the realm of particles and probabilities, time doesn't behave like the steady flow we imagine. In fact, some physicists argue that time disappears altogether. Can you imagine that? That beneath the surface of everything you've ever known, every memory, every heartbeat, every sunrise, there may be no ticking clock at all? To understand this, we need to remember that physics is built on equations, and equations tell stories. Newton's equations assumed time was universal and absolute. Einstein's equations revealed time could bend with motion and gravity. But then came an equation that seemed to erase time entirely. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation, named after John Wheeler and Bryce DeWitt. When they tried to merge quantum mechanics with general relativity, they ended up with a mathematical framework in which time did not exist. The equation describes the universe, but it does so timelessly. It doesn't care about past, present, or future, it simply states what is. Imagine writing down the entire story of the universe in a single book, but instead of the pages being read one after another, they all exist at once, equally real, equally present. That's the kind of reality this equation suggests. This idea leads to the block universe concept, also called eternalism. In this view, the universe is not a flowing river of moments. Instead, it's like a vast block of space-time, with every event past, present, and future already etched into its structure. The day you were born, the breath you're taking right now, the last day you'll live, they're all there, existing simultaneously like coordinates on a map. From within, you only experience one slice at a time, what you call the present. But from outside, the entire map simply is. Can you feel how unsettling that is? If this is true, then the future already exists. Your choices, your triumphs, your regrets, they're all written into the fabric of the block. You're not moving through time. You're simply moving through your awareness of it. This raises a haunting question. If all moments exist equally, what does that mean for free will? Are we truly choosing, or are we just discovering the choices already inscribed into the block of space-time? Many physicists and philosophers wrestle with this, and no clear answer exists. Some argue that our sense of freedom is an illusion, a product of consciousness navigating a frozen structure. Others believe that even if the block universe exists, our experience of moving through it gives meaning to the journey. You may not be altering the map, but you are living the story, and perhaps that matters just as much. Still, the suspicion lingers. If the future is as real as the past, what does it mean to say you have control over anything at all? And yet, quantum theory complicates even this picture. Because in its mathematics, the future isn't always a fixed block. Instead, it appears as probabilities, waves of possibility waiting to collapse into reality. At the quantum level, particles don't have definite positions until they're measured. They exist in superpositions, clouds of maybes, potential realities waiting to be observed. If the building blocks of the universe live in probabilities, what does that say about time? Perhaps time itself is not a steady flow, but a series of collapsed possibilities, strung together by observation. Perhaps what we call the now is just the universe deciding, moment by moment, which possibility to actualize. Doesn't that sound less like a machine and more like a mystery? Imagine for a moment that every instant of your life, every choice you didn't make, every path you didn't walk is still out there in some probability cloud, real in its own way until it isn't. The life you're living is just one thread pulled from a tapestry of infinite threads. This interpretation, though controversial, offers a mind-bending suggestion. Maybe the future doesn't exist as a fixed reality, but as a spectrum of possibilities waiting for you to encounter them. And if that's true, then your choices matter deeply, not because they create time but because they collapse it into form. In that sense, you're not merely moving through time. You're participating in the construction of what time becomes. But let's pause and notice the contrast here. On one hand, the block universe tells us all moments exist equally, fixed and eternal. On the other hand, quantum mechanics tempts us with the idea of an open future, a realm of probabilities collapsing into actualities. Which is it? Is everything already there, or are we building reality as we go? The debates rage on, with physicists and philosophers split, some embracing eternalism, others defending presentism, which insists only the present is real, and still others clinging to the idea that the flow of time itself is fundamental, not illusory. Authority gives us no certainty. Here Einstein leaned toward the block universe, while others argue fiercely against it. And so we're left with mystery, with the unsettling but liberating truth that no one fully knows. But maybe that uncertainty is the point. If science has shown us anything, it's that reality is rarely as simple as our instincts suggest. We want time to be a flowing river, neat and sequential, comforting in its familiarity. Yet at the deepest levels, the universe resists this picture. It shows us instead a reality where time may not flow at all, where past and future are just as real as now, or where the future is an ocean of probabilities waiting to crystallize. And as disorienting as that is, doesn't it also open something inside you? Doesn't it suggest that your life, your moments, are part of a mystery vaster and stranger than anything you've been taught to believe? Consider how this reframes your personal experience. If the block universe is true, then every version of you already exists. The child you once were, the person you are now, the elder you may become. They're not gone or waiting, they're all equally real. And if the quantum view of probabilities is true, then each choice you make is not trivial but profound, collapsing infinite possibilities into one lived reality. Either way, your relationship with time transforms. You are not simply a passenger carried along by an invisible current. You are either a being whose entire story is already woven into the fabric of the cosmos, or a being whose awareness actively shapes which thread of reality becomes real. In both cases, your existence becomes staggering in its weight and wonder. And think about the suspense this creates. If time doesn't flow, then what is this sensation you have of moving forward? Why do you remember yesterday but not tomorrow? Why does the present feel alive while the past feels fixed? Could it be that consciousness itself is the engine that creates the illusion of time's flow? Some theorists suggest that time, as we know it, is not fundamental but emergent, that it arises from the way complex systems like the brain stitch events together. In this sense, time may be less a property of the universe and more a property of perception. If that's true, then time exists because you exist. And without you, perhaps it wouldn't. Isn't that thought both terrifying and empowering? Terrifying because it means the flow of time might be an illusion, and everything you've relied on as constant could dissolve under scrutiny. Empowering because it means you are not a passive observer of time, you are a participant in how it unfolds, a co-creator of the very fabric of reality you inhabit. If all moments exist at once, then your life is already vast beyond comprehension. If time is probabilities collapsing, then your awareness and choices are part of shaping the universe itself. Either way, you matter in a way more profound than you might ever have imagined. So as you sit with this, let yourself feel the awe. Imagine all moments existing at once. Your first breath, your last, and every heartbeat between. Imagine the universe as a block of space-time, eternal and complete, with you moving through it like a beam of light tracing a path. Or imagine instead that the future is not written, that it waits in shimmering probability until you step into it, collapsing it into form. Both possibilities defy intuition. Both are staggering. And both remind us that time, the thing we thought we understood, may be the greatest mystery of all. And as strange as these ideas are, we're not done yet. Because if quantum theory hints that time might not be fundamental, philosophy takes this question even further, asking whether time itself is nothing more than a lens, a structure of the human mind, a way we make sense of reality. But before we step into that realm, pause here, in this place of uncertainty. Feel the weight of the mystery pressing in. You've lived your whole life assuming time flows, but maybe it doesn't. You've assumed the future is unwritten, but maybe it's already there. Or maybe, just maybe, your choices are shaping it as you go. Isn't it worth sitting with that tension, letting it change how you see every passing second? We've walked through the personal side of time and the scientific side, but to fully appreciate the depth of this mystery, we need to turn to philosophy. Because long before atomic clocks and relativity, long before quantum physics pulled the rug out from beneath our feet, human beings were already grappling with the question of what time truly is. And in many ways, the most haunting insights don't come from equations but from words, from thinkers who sat with the puzzle and tried to describe it. Their reflections remind us that time is not only something measured in laboratories or felt in our bodies, it's something contemplated in the mind, wrestled with in the silence of thought, and woven into the very structure of how we make sense of reality. Take Augustine, the 4th century philosopher and theologian, who confessed something that feels startlingly modern. He wrote, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know." Isn't that the way of it? We live in time constantly, yet when pressed to define it, it slips away. Augustine suggested that time is a mystery of the mind, a structure of human experience rather than a thing in itself. The past, he argued, no longer exists. The future has not yet arrived. All that truly exists is the present moment, and even the present seems to vanish the instant you try to grasp it. For him, the reality of time was not an external flow but an internal construction, bound to memory and expectation. The past exists in our minds as memory, the future as anticipation, and the present as attention. In that sense, time is less an external river and more a psychological fabric we weave moment by moment. That perspective resonates because you've lived it. Think about how you only ever occupy the now, yet your sense of identity depends on remembering who you were yesterday and imagining who you might be tomorrow. Without memory, the past is gone. Without imagination, the future is inaccessible. And yet both feel real to you. Augustine's insight is unsettling because it suggests that time exists only in consciousness. Outside of us, perhaps there is no past or future at all, just an eternal now, with our minds stitching it into a story. Doesn't that make you wonder whether time is as objective as you once assumed? Centuries later, Immanuel Kant took this reflection even further. For Kant, time was not something out there, part of the fabric of the external world. Instead, he argued that time is a lens, a structure of the human mind that shapes how we experience reality. Just as you see the world through the lens of space, you perceive objects as near or far, above or below. You also experience reality through the lens of time. Events appear as earlier or later, causes before effects, not because time exists independently, but because your mind organizes experience that way. Time, for Kant, is a condition of perception, not a property of things in themselves. In other words, you don't perceive time because it exists, you perceive time because that's how your mind processes reality. Consider what that means. If Kant is right, then time is not a feature of the universe but of you. It is part of the operating system of consciousness, not an external dimension. Imagine wearing tinted glasses your entire life, never realizing they were there. You would think the world simply was that color. In the same way, Kant believed time is the tinted lens of perception. You don't notice it because it shapes everything you see. If that's true, then to ask whether time exists might be like asking whether blue exists in the sky. It exists in your perception, but not necessarily in the world as it is. This is a radical thought, but it explains something you've probably felt. When you are deeply immersed in a moment, you don't ask, "What is time?" You simply live. It's only when you step back, when you try to analyze or define it, that time reveals its strangeness. We don't ask what time is when we're fully engaged in living. We ask when we're trying to step outside of it, to hold it in our hands, to turn it into an object. But if time is part of how we perceive reality, then we can never truly step outside of it. It is not the river we float down but the current of perception itself. Modern philosophers have continued this exploration, and they often find themselves standing between two possibilities. Either time is fundamental, woven into the very fabric of the cosmos, or it is emergent, a secondary feature that arises from deeper processes. Some argue that time is like temperature. Temperature doesn't exist as a single thing at the level of individual atoms. It emerges from the collective behavior of countless particles. In the same way, perhaps time emerges from the collective behavior of events, a property that arises only at large scales, not something fundamental at the deepest level of reality. If that's the case, then time may not exist as a universal truth but as a useful concept for beings like us, living in the middle scale between the cosmic and the quantum. Others resist this, insisting that time must be fundamental, that it cannot be explained away as an illusion or an emergent property. They argue that the flow you feel is too intrinsic to dismiss, that causality itself, the sense that one thing leads to another, depends on time being real. Without it, how could the universe even function? How could there be a before and after, a seed and a tree, a birth and a death? To deny time's reality seems to some like denying the very possibility of change. And change is everywhere. But here is where curiosity becomes irresistible. If time is just a concept, if it's something the mind creates or something that emerges only at certain scales, then what exactly is moving forward? When you say, time passes, what is doing the passing? If the past is only memory and the future only imagination, then the present is all you ever have. And yet, the present itself feels unstable. Try to hold on to this very second, and it slips instantly into the past. You can never grasp it fully. Doesn't that suggest that time, whether fundamental or emergent, is never quite within your reach? This tension, the pull between time as fundamental and time as constructed, is not just intellectual. Touches how you live. If time is fundamental, then your life is part of a grand cosmic order, a thread woven into an infinite fabric. If time is emergent, then your experience of it is more fragile, more dependent on perception, and perhaps more malleable. Either way, it shifts how you see yourself. You are not merely a creature caught in the flow of something external. You are also the interpreter, the participant, the consciousness that gives time shape. And that realization can be both unsettling and empowering. Philosophy doesn't give us certainty about time. What it gives us is perspective. Augustine reminds us that time may exist only in our experience, tied to memory and anticipation. Kant shows us that time may be a lens of perception, not a property of reality. Modern thinkers push us to ask whether time is fundamental or emergent, objective or illusory. And in each case, the question deepens rather than resolves. But maybe that's the point. Time is not something to be captured or defined once and for all. It is something to be contemplated, to be lived into, to be allowed to remain mysterious. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "Where did the time go?" pause and notice what you're really asking. You're not questioning the movement of the clock. You're questioning the way your life has been filled or left empty by memory and meaning. You're asking whether you've truly lived the moments that passed. And when you feel the rush of time moving too fast, or the drag of it slowing unbearably, you're brushing against the same mystery that puzzled Augustine, Kant, and every philosopher since. You're experiencing not just seconds and minutes, but the very strangeness of existence itself. And perhaps, at the heart of it, the question isn't whether time exists, but whether our search for it is really a search for something else. Maybe when we ask what time is, we're really asking what it means to be alive, to change, to move from who we were to who we are becoming. Time, in that sense, is less an answer and more a mirror, reflecting back to us the mystery of our own existence. We've wandered through many landscapes of time, the slippery perceptions of daily life, the precise measurements of civilization, the bending and stretching of relativity, the relentless arrow of entropy, the vanishing of time in quantum equations, and the haunting reflections of philosophers who questioned whether time is anything more than a lens of the mind. Now we stand at a crossroads. After everything, what are we left with? Does time truly exist, or have we been chasing an illusion all along? Science, psychology, and philosophy offer competing answers, but maybe the truth is not in choosing one but in weaving them together. Physics tells us that time behaves like a dimension, one that bends with speed and gravity, one that gives events a place in the fabric of space-time. Entropy insists on direction, pulling us forward, never backward. Quantum mechanics whispers that at the deepest level, time may vanish, replaced by probabilities and timeless equations. Meanwhile, psychology reminds us that time is elastic, subjective, filtered through attention, memory, and anticipation. And philosophy suggests that time may be nothing more than a structure of the mind, an organizing principle that allows us to perceive a flowing world instead of a chaotic blur. How do we reconcile these stories? Do they contradict one another? Or are they simply describing different faces of the same mystery? Perhaps time is both external and internal. Externally, it behaves like a dimension we can measure, predict, and even manipulate in equations. Internally, it is felt as experience, bending under the weight of joy or sorrow. Maybe what physics describes and what you feel are not the same thing, but neither is false. They are two perspectives on the same enigma, one from the outside, detached and mathematical, the other from the inside, lived and emotional. So, then asking whether time exists might be like asking whether music exists. Scientifically, it is only vibrations in air. But lived from within, music is melody, rhythm, emotion. Both descriptions are real. Neither cancels the other. Could time be the same? Think about the way you live. You rely on clocks and calendars to structure your day. Yet the richness of your life depends not on those measurements but on how the moments feel. A minute spent waiting in fear is not the same as a minute spent laughing with someone you love. The clock insists they are equal, but you know otherwise. This suggests that time is not just something we inhabit but something we create. In a sense, every human being is a timekeeper, shaping the experience of life through attention and meaning. Isn't it possible that your brain, through memory and anticipation, has built time as a kind of survival tool? Without it, how could you plan, learn, or even recognize yourself as the same person from one day to the next? But if time is a construction, does that make it less real? Not necessarily. Consider language. Words are human inventions, yet they shape reality, carrying meaning across generations. Consider money. It has no inherent substance, yet it governs economies, builds civilizations, and transforms lives. Its reality comes not from what it is, but from what it allows us to do. Maybe time is similar. It may not be an object you can touch or a fundamental property of particles, but it shapes your experience, organizes your actions, and gives your life a sense of continuity. In that sense, time is as real as it needs to be. And still, there is awe in remembering how fragile it might be. If relativity is true, then your head is aging faster than your feet right now, simply because gravity is slightly weaker a meter higher off the ground. If quantum physics is true, then the deepest laws of the universe have no time written into them at all. If philosophy is true, then you only ever live in a present moment your mind is constantly stitching together from memory and imagination. Put those together, and you see a picture that is not neat, not simple, but infinitely rich. Time is at once physical and psychological, external and internal, real and illusory. It is both the structure of the cosmos and the fabric of consciousness. Isn't that, in its own way, beautiful? There's a temptation to want closure here, to demand a final answer. We want to know, is time real or not? But maybe the gift of this exploration is realizing that certainty is not the point. Time is not just a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Its ambiguity invites humility, reminding us that we exist inside something we do not fully understand. And maybe that is what makes life so precious. If time were simple, predictable, fully explained, would it hold the same wonder? Would a fleeting moment still feel like a treasure if you knew exactly what it was? Or is it the very fragility, the very slipperiness, that makes moments worth savoring? Think about your own life. Think of a memory that feels vivid, like you could step back into it even now. Perhaps it's a childhood afternoon, the sun glowing on your face. Perhaps it's the voice of someone you miss. Perhaps it's a turning point that shaped who you are. That moment, though gone by the clock, still exists in you. And think about something you're anticipating: the joy of reunion, the thrill of possibility, the hope of what tomorrow might bring. The future, though not yet real by the clock, already exists in your imagination. Past and future live inside you, stitched together into the story you call yourself. In that sense, time is not just something you move through, it's something you are. It's the canvas on which your identity is painted. So when you ask whether time exists, maybe you're really asking, what does it mean to be human? Because to be human is to remember, to anticipate, to live in the fragile, elusive present. To be human is to experience the passing of moments not as uniform ticks, but as waves of meaning, stretching and collapsing according to how deeply you are engaged. And to be human is to feel awe in the face of a universe that refuses to give you a simple answer. That awe itself is a kind of time, an opening, a pause, a breath where you realize that the mystery is as important as the knowledge. What if uncertainty isn't something to fear, but something to embrace? What if not knowing whether time exists is itself the doorway to living more fully? Because if you cannot pin time down, then every moment becomes more precious. You cannot store it, you cannot hoard it, you cannot predict how much of it you have. You can only live it. That vulnerability is what gives life its intensity. And maybe that's the hidden gift. The more time resists definition, the more it demands presence. The less you can control it, the more it invites you to savor what is here right now. So let this uncertainty be a source of calm, not fear. You don't need to solve time to live it. You don't need to know whether it exists as a dimension or an illusion to feel the warmth of a hand, the comfort of laughter, the quiet of your own breath. These are the moments that make life real, whether or not time itself is. And maybe that's the greatest reassurance philosophy, science, and psychology together can give, that the beauty of time is not in its certainty but in its mystery. And as you let these thoughts settle, notice what you feel. A mixture of awe, curiosity, maybe even peace. The story of time is unfinished, perhaps unfinishable. But maybe that's the point. Time isn't there to be conquered. It's there to remind you of the wonder of being alive. So let yourself linger in that wonder. Let yourself rest in the mystery. And let yourself carry forward the gentle truth that sometimes, not knowing is the most beautiful answer of all. Take a deep breath. Let it settle into your chest, slowly filling and slowly leaving, like a tide rolling in and out. Notice how each breath blends into the next, how you can't quite tell where one ends and the next begins. In that rhythm, you can feel something that lies beyond clocks, beyond numbers, beyond the tick of seconds. You can feel life itself, pulsing quietly, unmeasured. Maybe this is the truest experience of time, not as a sequence of minutes slipping away, but as the simple presence of being here, now, breathing. All through this journey, we've been chasing time through childhood summers that stretched forever, through civilizations that built calendars and clocks, through the bending fabric of relativity, through the probabilities of quantum physics, through the reflections of philosophers who dared to say time might only exist in the mind. We've gathered pieces, insights, possibilities, and each one has deepened the mystery instead of solving it. And now, at the end of this exploration, I want to invite you to let all those thoughts soften, to let the need for an answer dissolve. Because the question we began with, does time actually exist, may not be one that has to be solved. Maybe it's one to be lived. As you listen, notice how your body is already beginning to rest. Your eyes may feel heavier, your breath slower, your thoughts more fluid. Time begins to lose its grip when you relax like this. The pressure of clocks, the demands of schedules, the constant push to be on time, they fade into the background. And isn't that a relief? To realize that you don't need to master time, that you don't need to hold on to it, that it's safe to let it go. For this moment, nothing is demanded of you. For this moment, you are free. Think of how often you felt ruled by time. The alarm clock forcing you out of bed, the deadlines looming over your day, the calendar filling with obligations. And yet, here now, lying still, you can set all that down. The clocks will keep ticking whether you watch them or not. The schedules will be waiting for you tomorrow. Right now, you are not late or early. You are exactly where you are meant to be. Isn't that what freedom feels like? We began this journey with wonder and with questions. Is time real or an invention of the mind? Does it flow like a river, or is it a block where all moments already exist? Is the future fixed, or a cloud of probabilities collapsing as we choose? And though each perspective opened new doors, none of them gave us certainty. And that's okay. Because here, at the close, maybe certainty isn't what matters. Maybe peace matters more. Maybe the beauty of time is not in solving it, but in living inside the mystery it creates. As you rest, you might picture all the moments of your life blending together. Memories of childhood, glimpses of today, imaginings of tomorrow. Instead of being separate, see them as threads in a single tapestry, all woven into who you are. Feel the comfort of knowing that you carry your past in your memory and your future in your imagination. Time doesn't have to be an enemy, something slipping away. It can be a story, a gift, a companion. It can be the canvas that holds your life together, even if you never fully understand what it is. Notice how your breathing anchors you, how it keeps you in the present without effort. Each inhale and exhale is a reminder that you are alive in this moment, and that this moment is enough. You don't need to rush into the future or drag the past behind you. You can simply rest here, safe in the timelessness of your own breath. The flow of time doesn't matter when you give yourself permission to simply be. And maybe that's the greatest secret, that the question, does time exist, matters far less when you stop trying to capture time and start allowing yourself to live. Whether time is fundamental or emergent, whether it is real or illusion, whether the future is fixed or still being shaped, it doesn't change the truth that you have this moment right now. And if you can live fully here, then you have touched the essence of time in the most human way possible. So let yourself sink into that peace. Let the tension ease from your body. Let the restlessness quiet in your mind. Imagine setting down the weight of hours and days, as if you were placing them gently on a shelf. Imagine stepping outside of clocks and calendars, where there is no rush, no countdown, no urgency. Imagine that in this space, time is not something pressing on you but something dissolving around you, leaving you suspended in calm. That's where you are now, held in timelessness, safe and free. Think of the stars scattered across the night sky. Some of their light has traveled millions of years to reach you, and yet when you look up, you see them all at once. The ancient past and your present vision meet together in a single gaze. Isn't that a reminder that time is not always linear, not always simple? That sometimes moments stretch across unimaginable distances and still converge here, in your awareness. In the same way, let the moments of your life stretch and converge. Let yourself feel whole in the midst of the mystery. If your thoughts drift, let them. If your memories surface, let them pass. If your imagination reaches into tomorrow, let it float. There is no need to hold on tightly. Just breathe, just rest, just allow. This is what it means to step outside of time's grip, not to stop it, not to solve it, but to release yourself from the urgency it creates. To feel, if only for a while, that you are enough as you are, that this moment is complete. And so we close with the same question we began with. Does time exist? After everything we've explored, the science, the philosophy, the psychology, the wonder tonight, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the beauty of time is not in proving it real or denying its existence, but in living fully within it and sometimes letting it go. Maybe what matters most is realizing that your life is made of moments, and that peace comes not from measuring them but from embracing them. As you drift toward sleep, carry this with you. You are part of something vast and mysterious. You are stitched into a reality that resists simple answers. And that mystery is not a burden but a gift. It means there will always be wonder, always be awe, always be something beyond your grasp. And that means there will always be beauty too. So rest now. Let the flow of time fall away. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to fear it. You don't need to solve it. For tonight it is enough to breathe, to release, to be. And as you close your eyes and drift into that timeless sleep, remember this gentle truth. You are safe, you are whole, and you are free. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel.